Are you accusing us of being Galaxy biased here on this podcast?
Oh no. I'm accusing
journalism here.
I'm just correcting the notion that LAFC was somehow dominated in this game. Were they caught off guard to start with? Yes.
Thank you for downloading and listening to the West Box Score. We take a look at sports on the west side of the country, inside and outside of the box score. Here to do that with me is my co-host, my co-pilot, my co-captain, the Clayton Kershaw, to my AJ Ellis, Donald Paz. What's up, Donald?
Yo, what up, Alex? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Just excited because I've been enjoying a full weekend of sports and it's been great. So before we bring on our super sub secret weapon, I need to take a quick moment to ask you to follow us on Twitter, Instagram at WestBoxScore, and also subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast downloaded. Now from the Fox Crate podcast, Captain Clutch himself, Sonny Hermano. What's up, Sonny?
What's up, fellas?
So, Sonny, how are you holding up these last few days ever since last week's LAFC debacle? I mean, typical Bob Bradley style. He has a big win against Seattle, a rival club of theirs, even though you don't fully admit they're a rival of yours. Then he goes out and loses his next match. I mean, that's typical. What went wrong for these tournament favorites just a match ago?
I don't know what you're talking about. It's basketball season and baseball season now, so get with the times, Alex. Donald and I have been talking plenty of baseball and basketball. I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're stuck.
You're right. This is old news. Let's just move right past it.
I'm just kidding.
But against Seattle, they look so dominant, man, and just a whole different team showed up.
You kind of hit it on the head, man. It's Bob Bradley's MO to this point, and not just with LAFC. I mean, dating back to some of his other coaching spells with other clubs. This was a case of, it was disappointing. To answer your question, it was not heartbreaking because this tournament being what it's been fun to watch. It was a nice reintroduction to sports. But obviously it was one of those things, like, it kicked off and it was like, all right, here we go. But you didn't really have the time of like a full MLS season where you can build that heartbreak into when you actually lose in the playoffs because of the long, daunting season and what it took you to get into the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. This didn't quite have that same feel. So that's why when they got eliminated, it was more like, oh, well, that was disappointing, as opposed to heartbreaking or you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree. And even in our group chat, we kept joking, this tournament doesn't matter anyway. It's like, it doesn't really matter, but it's still, like you've mentioned before, and we've mentioned before about these season shortened, or these pandemic shortened seasons, that there's still something on the line. So you want to win what's potentially out there. So it's tough to lose that way, and especially tough to lose via penalty kicks. How does that add to the sting there?
I was going to say, Donald, do you want to give the folks a little recap of how that game went down between LAFC and Orlando and what the final score was? I didn't think
you'd want to rub salt in this wound, but
I think it's important for those Galaxy fans who maybe turned off this tournament a long time ago to know, how did this game go? How did the rest of the tournament end up?
So, I know that the Galaxy fans are going to love us recapping this loss for the LAFC. So the LAFC and Orlando City quarterfinal match ended with a loss in PKs for LAFC. It was a pretty good game for, I guess, Orlando City. You could say it seems like they came out the gate already knowing what they were going to do. And it was interesting seeing LAFC look the way they did, given that against Seattle, they did not look like that. They looked very dominant against Seattle. And then against this team, it felt like they forgot that they were playing. And it was weird seeing that as a Galaxy fan, watching them in this kind of like basically it's like a playoff game. Watching them do what they do was really surprising to me. I kind of felt like I almost wanted to believe that this was not happening, like this was not a real thing. But it was really weird seeing LAFC kind of fold and allowing Orlando City to just, do what they do. But it was crazy. The PKs were PKs. I feel like any team would, if you had to lose in PKs, I mean, it's really by chance. So you can't really say it was one team or the other that had a better tactic. It's really just a shootout. So it was really crazy. But I know LA Galaxy Twitter and LA Galaxy Reddit was going crazy, hating on LAFC for this loss. But then that's how petty we get sometimes. But it was interesting. And props to Orlando City. They came in and they just did what they wanted to do, and LAFC was just reacting to everything.
Well, I mean, let's get it right though, because LAFC, you're making it sound like LAFC got dominated in this game, but they did not get dominated in this game. That's actually not how this game went. Orlando City came out the gates, pressuring LAFC and forcing some errors from LAFC's end. But if you're looking at the whole 90 minutes, it was actually still dominated by LAFC, so much so that LAFC was winning 1-0 going into the 89th minute.
Are you accusing us of being Galaxy biased here on this podcast?
Oh, no. I'm
journalism here?
I'm just correcting the notion that LAFC was somehow dominating in this game. Were they caught off guard to start with? Yes.
No, I just felt that every time LAFC passed the ball, there would always be an Orlando City guy right there to intercept almost every single time. And that's kind of what I kept seeing all the time. It almost felt like there was a disconnect with the passing. But the thing is, the difference between LAFC and Orlando City is that LAFC have finishers on their roster. And that's what Orlando City was missing. But I mean, obviously that late extra time, header on the corner was just kind of like, I mean, at some point, I guess they were going to do something, right? But it just kind of felt weird seeing that that's how it played out, given that LAFC could have squeaked out of it. But I mean, again, I that's just kind of what I saw. I just felt like every time LAFC had the ball and they were passing, they kind of were connecting, but for some reason in the midfield, they were falling apart, and Orlando City was there to intercept the ball, and they were doing everything to clear and all that. And I mean, that goal that LAFC made, you could tell, like, to me, it looked like it was they threw everything they can to just get in there, and they finally broke through, and then it went in, and it felt good for LAFC to finally get something in. But it looked like it was a big thing they had to overcome, which was kind of shocking to see, given how they looked against Seattle, where they were just kind of running circles around them, So that was just my observation of it.
No, Orlando was definitely the much more physical team in this game throughout, and that obviously created a different challenge for LAFC to deal with, which is surprising. The irony here is that Seattle had the exact same strategy that Orlando just employed back in the playoffs when Seattle beat us then, and then they kind of got away from that. This time they decided to try to be more offensive, and Seattle got burned for that, whereas I think Orlando just was more physical and pressured the ball more, which resulted again in those errors. And I think they slightly won the possession battle throughout the whole 90 minutes. But again, I mean, that to your point, Donald, yes, that goal that LAFC scored was definitely at the time against the run of play. I mean, Orlando had just missed a PK or had a PK blocked by Vermeer. Great save. And it was a classic momentum shift where you miss one opportunity on one end and the other team counters and puts theirs away. And it's like, oh my God, you went up from being potentially up 1-0 to being now down 1-0. And LAFC's defense, to their credit though, did keep Orlando off the score sheet for the most part until that set piece, that corner in the 89th minute. Whether you chalk that up, I mean, it was poor man marking, first of all. I don't want to chalk it up all to fatigue, but when it happens in the 89th minute, you get dudes that get lazy. It's unfortunate because you're literally 5 minutes away when you count stoppage time from sealing the win. So it's like, just buckle down and do what you got to do. But it was a great set piece, great header by Orlando. And then like you said, it went to PKs. And at that point, I never feel good going to PKs because there's no such thing. If anybody ever tells you, oh, they have the better PK shooters, that's such a myth in soccer and football. You might as well just toss grass in the air and see which way the wind blows. Like that's how you're going to determine who's going to win this. Yeah. Yes, I will say having the better keeper is going to make you feel more confident going into the PKs. But if your keepers are pretty much level in that sense, then really it's a crapshoot, and that's what happened, and so props to Orlando City for coming through as the host city. Now I'm rooting for them to just kind of go all the way.
I think the only other bummer, it was the fact that the 5-4 win on penalties was just because was it Harvey that just hit the bar? It wasn't even like a legit save by Orlando City's keeper or a super botched like kick. It was just it hit the crossbar and it just went the wrong way.
Yeah,
so.
I mean that's what happens when you have defenders taking your penalty kicks. I hate to say that, but there's a reason why guys are defenders.
Yeah.
And they're not midfielders or forwards, Not to say that there's not defenders that can score. There's plenty in the history of the game, but usually because they're not used to being put in those situations. It's, you never know what you're going to get, man. So although he is one of our veterans and I get why Jordan Harvey got a spot kick there, but it's something you never feel truly confident about when he's actually going to take it. So, but yeah, to wrap that up, I mean, again, props to Orlando City. It was disappointing that we blew that lead. Yeah. Again, I think we talked about this in our group chat, that part of it was also that LAFC had a couple chances to actually go up 2-0, that Diego Rossi, for instance, and Brian Rodriguez, they just kind of muffed the finishes. And, it's as Alex would tell you, it's a whole different game. It should have been 3-0 at that point. But that's what happens. We got penalized for not putting those away and giving Orlando a window, and they took advantage, forced it to go to PKs, and the rest was history, man. So. Yeah. So at that moment, I immediately switched over to whatever the game was on MLB Network or MLB TV. I think you guys were still talking about the game, and I was like, yo, it's baseball season. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Well, now that's a wrap for the LA side of the U.S. Reopen Cup. We could focus on other sports like that. But the U.S. Reopen Cup is still going on. There's 4 teams now. What are your predictions to who's going to win it all? Philadelphia Union, Minnesota United, Orlando City, Portland Timbers. Who's your pick to win it all, Sonny?
On paper, if I had to bet, I'd say Portland, just because I think they're the best team out of those 4. But if we're going by who's playing the best, I mean, Philadelphia looks really good right now, man. Mm-hmm. My heart, I think, is just rooting for Orlando, just because, again, they're the host city and they just knocked us out. So out of respect, it's like, hey, go and win the whole thing. But I'm going to say Portland. I'm going to say Portland's going to end up winning this tournament.
Donald?
I'm going to say Minnesota United. I feel like they last season were the team that the Galaxy beat in the playoffs. So to see them be back again at this part of the tournament just kind of shows you that they're definitely building something over there. And at first I thought maybe it was just like the new feel that they got and, new energy, but it seems like it really helped, the whole club step up. So it was really impressive what they did last season. And I'm kind of like, at first I was a little surprised that they made it this far, but then at the same time I'm not, because they were in the playoffs. So they are like a playoff contending team. So big ups to them. And, I hope they take it. I think that would just be a huge surprise to everybody. Given like Sonny said, Philadelphia, I believe, is the favorite to win it at this point with these 4. And Portland does have that veteran presence that they've been there. They've won it before with the MLS Cup. And but it'd be crazy to see Minnesota just take it as like a surprise of like, oh, shoot, like we're here now, So
who do you got, Alex?
Well, my pick when this whole thing started was Inter Miami. I thought they were going to surprise a lot of people and put it together being in their home state. But now I got to go with the actual host city of Orlando City. I mean, they have no home crowd supporting them, but it's just something about playing in some familiar environment, and they're used to that muggy, terrible weather out there. So maybe that's somewhat of an advantage to them. And they looked really good against LAFC, and LAFC looked really good going into that match. So it's like something to build upon. Although I did not like them celebrating like they had won the entire championship after they beat LAFC. So when teams do that, that worries me for their next match. So to answer the question, I think Orlando City might do it, but I would not be surprised if Minnesota does it for the reasons that Donald mentioned, because Minnesota, they're no longer the underdogs as they've always claimed to be.
I mean, that's what happens when you beat the best team in the league, man. People get excited. It's like if the Lakers, anytime the Lakers get beat, the other team celebrates like, yeah, we just beat the best team. So you gotta forgive them for that, man. You gotta.
You're not entirely wrong there, but if you are the best team in the league, you usually have championship cup to prove that you're the best team.
It's
not just a little plate. So, Sonny, is LAFC going to prove they are the best team if the MLS does resume August 22nd, as they've been trying to do? Do you think they'll get it done once the season gets restarted?
Is Vela playing?
You got to ask him. Does he feel like?
Well, I'm saying that's the rhetorical question, right? Because
he is playing.
Because
it's not like he's injured. He just didn't go to the tournament.
No, but part of it can be because we don't know enough of these details yet. As far as, is it going to be like the MLB where all these teams are traveling to each other's stadiums, obviously, and.
How would you feel if he didn't decide to play just because, you know what, I have a pregnant wife at home, I don't want to attract COVID or what have you? That we understood with the whole bubble and leaving his wife, but now he wouldn't have to.
Well,
so would it just now seem like he just doesn't want to play?
No. Look at what's going on in the MLB. I mean, how many players have opted out just as a result of their mismanaged with COVID, happening in real time and all these players being reckless. So I absolutely wouldn't fault anybody, not just Vela, but anybody for saying, you know what, nah, I'm good, but thanks. Maybe next year, when this thing's figured out. Because again, until I can see the actual details that MLS has to exercise this season or to make sure it happens, if they're going to follow the MLB's plan, no thanks. That would make no sense. And at that point, again, it might as well be another bubble because I couldn't tell you. I mean, I still like LAFC's chances to go far in the season, assuming that they stay healthy. But with no Vela, it's like there's no, not to say that he is the end all be all. We've had Vela last season, but it does make a big difference in a longer season, in a bubble, in a tournament where you just have to win a few games to get in. That's different. When you have to play every team in a daunting season, in a long season, week in, week out, and you're going to lose some players and you don't have your best player. I mean, you ask Barcelona how they do without Messi for long periods of stretches.
Oh, exactly.
So
all hypotheticals. The MLS season may not even happen.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you asked me, what was your question? You said, how do I feel about winning cups, not plates? Well, how do you like the Galaxy's chances of winning games, not halves this season?
They haven't won a game in over 9 months. Mind you, 3 of those months were there was no activity going on, and there was an off season. But there's so many webs to untangle for what the Galaxy need to fix. I mean, this would be another 2-hour-long podcast if we went.
I had to ask for your Galaxy supporter fans. No,
of course, we all know. Donald and I can attest to how we talk for hours on end at our day jobs. Like, we should. What the Galaxy need to do? They have no identity. They have no style of play, and then there's this player that they're going after, but that's not going to help fix that issue. It's such a tangled web of nonsense over there and in Carson, as you guys, as the LAFC fans like to say. Oh,
you mean how we like to just point to a map? You're telling me you say we're liars?
No, but it's the disrespect for the big club. It's just unbelievable. Donald, did you want to tack on to the Galaxy
predictions for the season?
Oh man, I don't want to use the word throwaway season, but I feel like that's what I kind of go to, and it's tough to say that, but I don't know. I really, I'm not saying I don't have any hope. I just hope it's a fun season for them. Like, I hope we have some sort of memories with Chicharito, but right now there's just like a lot of scars, so hopefully they turn it around. And I have no aspirations that they're going to make the playoffs or anything. But then it's like weird because it's like there's no tanking in the MLS because the draft doesn't really mean much. It's more about getting and signing players that actually are going to work. But yeah.
I wish there was relegation. I wish there was relegation.
This is where I agree with you, Sonny. I completely agree with you because that's maybe what the Galaxy need at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. As a fan of this team, they need a wake up call, and I don't know what it's going to take for them.
Yeah, because then the West box score would start talking about MLS and Division II soccer, just so you can cover the Galaxy.
What is it, USL?
Just so you could division.
Today on the West box score, USL Galaxy 2. That's a whole nother can of worms if we get into Galaxy 2 talk. But baseball is going on right now. MLS may not come back. We don't know after the reopen cup, but MLB is going strong, and the Dodgers are building. They're attempting to go strong. You know, we at least the Dodgers are. The Dodgers haven't had any cases. You know, knock on wood.
Yeah.
It was an eventful 2 games in Houston. You know, Joe Kelly cemented himself as a Dodger when he threw behind Alex Bregman and Carlos Correa. You know, Kelly then went on to end the inning with a strikeout of Correa, and while he was walking off the mound, Joe Kelly gave Correa the sad lip heard round the world. The bench is cleared for a nice, healthy discussion. The altercation resulted in a 1-game suspension for Houston Astros manager Dusty Baker and Dodgers manager Dave Roberts. But for some idiot reason, Joe Kelly received an 8-game suspension, which in this COVID 60-game season is equivalent to a 22-game suspension in a normal 162-game season. So no punches were thrown, no injuries were caused. So Donald, is Rob Manfred just taking it upon himself to ruin baseball, and why?
You know, I feel that at times I want to look at him, especially when that suspension came down. It was the worst thing ever that I was like, whoa, like I can't believe that this is how they're doing us. You know, this is how they're doing the Dodgers. That's not cool, given that, you know, the Astros did not get anything for what they did. And I mean, I'm talking about the players outside of just firing the coach and all of it. Overall, it wasn't as satisfying. I mean, everyone wanted to see a title being stripped and everything. And Manfred just kind of brushed everything off like, oh, it's not that big of a deal or whatever. And it's just bad. It's a bad look on him. And I think that, in regards to the suspension, it is terrible to look at it, and it's a bad look on Rob Manfred for sure, given all the things I just explained right now. But then at the same time, like the other side of it with the COVID outbreaks, I mean, it's just one of those things where like a part of it, I've thought about it and I said, you know, part of it is his fault for, you know, not taking ownership or taking responsibility for what's happening and not coming up with a better solution to having a season, or at least, you know, manning up and say, hey, you know what, we're just gonna not do a season. But, you know, not having a real concrete plan when you compare it to what NHL is doing right now and NBA is doing. It just feels like he's kind of, you know, he kind of has reacted to everything and not been proactive enough. And I feel that that's just not a good look on him. I know that they extended his contract in 2018 to 2024. And I am hoping that's kind of like the last of it. If this is the product that he plans to have on the field. On the other side of it is kind of like a little bit in defense of him. I do understand it's kind of hard with the outbreak happening to kind of like have players like kind of to confine them. You know what I mean? It's like, this is kind of what like I feel is kind of the scary part about college sports, is that like, how do you tell like 18 to 25-year-olds, we need you to stay in your rooms and only come out for the games and kind of like quarantine in between, when a lot of these kids don't want to do that. Like, so I think for the most part, like it feels like, you know, I think that, like you said, if we have no bubble, then you're running the big risk that you are going to have an outbreak, which is, I think, you know, we were kind of touching on with the MLS coming back. If how they do it, comes out to be like an MLB type of reaction, then it's not going to be good for the league. And then you add the media in on it, and the media is going to want to spin everything and make it seem like this is the worst thing ever. And I mean, as a commissioner, you're going to be the one that looks bad. So, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like comparing him to like a Dana White and to an Adam Silver, I mean, he's nowhere near that. Like Dana White, at least, you know, used to box when he was 17, came up, was managing, you know, Tito Ortiz, and, you know, and he looks like he loves UFC. So when he did the restart for UFC, he looked like he did it with such care and tenderness of like making sure this product gets taken out, that people love it, but at the same time that my fighters are protected. So there was like this like nice balance that he did, which is the same thing that Adam Silver did. You know, Adam Silver, was a guy that worked in development with the NBA, did help build the WNBA. So of course he was going to restart this NBA season or the playoff portion of it with such tenderness and care. And then Rob Manfred just looks more like Roger Goodell, who's just like doesn't really care and just wants to throw it out there. We just got to have it some way, one way or the other. But it was just ridiculous, everything that led up to it. The whole owners versus players thing, how he like kind of instigated that to really just creating all these extra rules that I think like people were on the fence about. But then at the same time, just not creating some sort of bubble situation or anything that would have prevented an outbreak from happening.
So it's great that we have the commissioner of baseball not be a real fan of baseball and trying to ruin it from the inside. But the Dodgers are doing good right now. At least we're seeing that. Donald, who's been hot for the Dodgers so far?
The player that I feel that has been hot, which I know is the player everyone in LA is talking about, is Mookie Betts. I feel he's been the most impressive on that lineup. He's a consistent hitter, and his defensive playing is really good. Obviously, the play of the week was his that line drive that came down right field that he caught and he threw out to third base. And that was against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And that was really impressive. And I feel like, just him on the lineup helps a lot with the Dodgers. Yesterday, they lost to the San Diego Padres. Mookie Betts did not play in that game because he did have a left middle finger injury. But just seeing Mookie out of the lineup and then the Dodgers go and do the opening series with the Padres and lose to them kind of, to me, tells you like how effective he is. You would think that the team like the Padres would be the team that you'd be okay with not playing him. But the fact that you're struggling and he's not there, that tells a lot about his impact.
And my favorite Mookie moment over the weekend was the home run in Arizona right into the pool.
Oh, yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was his first recorded home run as a Dodger, too. That's crazy.
I believe his second. That was his second home run of the weekend. His first one went just over the left field wall. Second one into the pool in Arizona. Every good Dodger hits it into the pool. Always remember that. So now what are you laughing at over there, Sonny?
I'm just laughing because it's funny. I laughed at that Diamondbacks Dodgers pool incident when the Dodgers were celebrating in their.
We love swimming, dude. We love swimming in Arizona. Dodgers.
Leave it to a Latino to start that shit. Fucking Adrian Gonzalez, just straight up. Fucking.
Then don't have a pool in your field if you don't want us to go.
Leave it to.
Typical Latinos always jumping into the neighbor's pool, right?
Making themselves at home right there.
So Donald, the flip side to it, which Dodger is having a bad year or bad?
I feel like Walker Buehler hasn't been as impressive as I thought he'd be. Currently, he's at a 5.19 ERA. And I think it's just interesting to see that like they're putting him with Will Smith like as that catcher pitcher duo. And I don't know if this is just the Dodgers trying to do this whole like these are the young bucks that are going to come up and kind of take the mantle from Kershaw. And so it was just really interesting seeing that because Buehler hasn't really been doing much. And it's not that he's terrible. Maybe it's just a slow start. I mean, it's only been 2 games that he's pitched. He pitched yesterday with the Padres. So he pitched the opening game with the Padres. And I feel like a big part of it was his starting pitching. And I think that on the flip side of that, again, going back to Will Smith, kind of like his I guess, quote unquote catcher that they're trying to pair him up with has also not been great at bat. He's at a 158 batting average, which hasn't been terrific. He made a couple errors in that Padres game that I feel also contributed to the loss. And I think it's just a lot of mental mistakes. And I think, because they're young and I think they're still, they're not there yet. They're young and they're developing. And I feel like for the most part, I think a lot to ask of them. But I think so far, Walker Buehler and Will Smith, that pitcher-catcher duo just hasn't been as impressive as I thought they'd be.
Yeah, Buehler's killing me on my fantasy team. So thanks, Walker Buehler. I appreciate it.
Buehler's still waiting for his day on. So like most of us Dodger fans were waiting for that also. But I feel like it's tough. This is like spring training 2.0 for a lot of these guys. And I wonder who's having a harder adjustment. It looks like the pitchers may be having a harder adjustment to this restart to spring training.
Absolutely.
It's early for them. So, I mean, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that. Sonny, how are your Seattle Mariners doing in the AL West?
They, as of the date of this recording, are in the thick of it, man. We're only 2 games out. We have a losing record, though, to be expected. I mean, they're actually ahead of the curve in many ways from what we were expecting as Mariners fans. You're talking about your kids. Again, our team is comprised of, we're the youngest team in the entire league, just by average age. So our there's been some promising things. You're absolutely right, Alex. Pitching is the thing that has been wildly inconsistent in this league from the restart. That pitching's what's hurting from this spring training 2.0, as you're calling it. And that's the case across the board. So what's weird, though, is there are some pitchers that are shining across the league. In spots, they look good. But it's also been interesting to see managers use them for 3 innings, 4 innings at a time, as opposed to their usual 6 innings that you're hoping to get out of your ace or your starter. But anyways, to get back to the M's, they're looking okay, man. I mean, we took 2 out of 3 from the Angels last week. As of the date of this episode dropping, we have played them now since again. So hopefully we took another 2 out of 3 from the Angels at that time. But that's always fun, to beat on the division rivals, the Halos, which was nice. Shout out to Kyle Lewis, man. If you guys are looking to expand your baseball knowledge across the league, keep your eye out on Kyle Lewis. That's our starting center fielder at the moment. The guy started the season with a 10-game hitting streak. He was one of only 2 players to do so, mashing. I think he was batting like 430. So that's been like a pleasant surprise. He was our first overall pick from the 2017 draft, MLB draft. So it's nice to see him in the majors now and actually delivering and kind of delivering on that promise that we were hoping we got when we drafted him. The kid's like a 5-tool player. So hopefully he keeps it up, man. He's a very humble dude. So it's easy to root for this guy. And for all the Angelino-centric baseball fans out there, keep your eyes out for Kyle Lewis. Pick him up on your fantasy team. If you play fantasy baseball, there's a freebie right there. So it's been fun.
Good advice, and hopefully nobody from New York is listening to this podcast because he'll be wearing pinstripes in 3 years.
Fuck the Yankees.
But what is it with the Seattle Mariners? Just their typical set. Kyle Lewis is as a current example. They'll build him up. He'll do great, but then they'll trade him away somewhere in New York. Well, I always think New York Yankees.
Why do you think that? Wait. That's not a typical Mariners thing to do. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think A-Rod right away.
A-Rod left as a free agent. That was it.
He went to Texas first, and then he went.
Yeah, he left as a free agent to the highest bidder, which was the Texas Rangers at the time, and the Mariners were no way going to be able to, pay him that same amount of money that the Rangers were offering him at the time. So, the Griffey trade happened because Griffey actually wanted to play at home with his. He got tired of commuting with his kids being at the stage of their lives where Griffey didn't want to miss out anymore. But outside of that, we've never really traded like our superstars. It's not like the Dodgers who get rid of Pedro Martinez and then he goes on to become a Hall of Famer.
My biggest gripe with Seattle is when we lost out on Adrian Beltre and he goes to Seattle
as a free agent.
As a free agent.
Yeah,
it made 0 sense at the time. Makes 0 sense still to this day.
But you can't have a gripe. How can you have a gripe with Seattle when the player left on his own?
No, I agree. He went on his own free will as a free agent, right?
Yeah.
But it's just so aggravating to me that we didn't keep him. He was one of my favorite players and still was one of my favorite players ever.
Yeah.
But to see him not finish his career in Dodger blue and then go to Seattle for more money that wasn't necessarily more money, just the ownership didn't want to fork over the money for him. And it's just, it still irks me to see him.
Don't remind me of that deal. I mean, I loved Adrian Beltre. Don't remind me of that deal, though, because that summer I remember vividly as the summer we signed Adrian Beltre and Richie Sexton. And we spent a shit ton of money on those two players. Adrian Beltre paid off a little bit, although he went on to be more productive with the Texas Rangers and the Boston Red Sox. Richie Sexton is a whole other story. But anyways, you're bringing up old wounds, man. Like, I don't want to talk about that summer.
we won't bring up any more old wounds. We're done. No more old wounds. But somebody who's nursing a wound right now is somebody down in Anaheim. Donald, what's going on there behind the orange curtain at the Big A?
So Shohei Ohtani on his second, I guess you could call debut, since his first one was a meltdown. He was shut down as a pitcher, and now he's day to day as a DH. It seems like he's having issues with his right elbow, and for now, I believe the Angels have to shut him down as a pitcher, and for the 4 to 6 weeks, and then he's gonna have to go through like a throwing progression. But as of now, it seems like he's gonna be more of just a designated hitter. Kind of a bummer for the Angels, given that I don't think they have such a deep pitching squad, so he would have definitely been pivotal for them to be able to have something that they can rely on, that it's just to have. I mean, you always need an extra arm that can do some damage to the other team, but it's unfortunate that it's been kind of a bummer that he's had a bad first game, and then his second game is now where it kind of solidified that he's gonna have to probably not pitch for a couple weeks for the moment, and just kind of focus on hitting. But I know for sure
they reported Joe Maddon already said he's not pitching for the rest of the season.
Oh, he's not. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Joe Maddon reported that today.
Yeah, it's a bummer for Angel fans that we're looking forward to Ohtani, shutting out other players and other teams, but. I mean, in a weird way, you have a great two-way player, so you have someone to look forward to at bat, not just Trout and Pujols and Rendon, who also been doing a lot of great for them. So hopefully for the Angels, I guess you have to really rely on that offense to carry them more than anything.
Yes, all 10 Angels fans are very disappointed by this. And so moving on now to basketball, the NBA restart. And just how exciting this has been in the NBA bubble. It starts off with Lakers versus Clippers on TNT, and just the production value, the game itself, everything seemed pretty good in my eyes. I thought it was a really great looking setup, an arena they have going on with the virtual, with the Zoom fans there in chairs. I think that's a great little look too. It's all so good so far. And no positive COVID tests, all good news. So Lakers versus Clippers. Donald, break us down on what happened between the Lakers and Clippers on TNT.
It was a really close game. The Lakers edged out the Clippers 103-101. But it was a really good game to watch if you love basketball. It was definitely a really exciting close game. The Lakers were up 35-23 in the first quarter. And then the Clippers outdid them 29 points to 19 points in the second quarter. So that's when the Clippers started coming back up. And then in the third quarter, the Clippers actually outdid the Lakers 25 points to 22 points. But then the Lakers came into the fourth quarter and edged it out 27 points to 24 points in the fourth quarter, which is what brought them to 103-101 on the win. And it was a really impressive performance seeing LeBron and AD back. And AD had a monster of a game. It really felt like they could not stop him. And the Clippers just did everything they could. And it seems like they were, at least from all the three, well, I think Patrick Beverley came back in. But, from Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, who were both out for the Clippers, I think Montrezl Harrell would have at least mitigated a lot of the damage that AD did to them. Given that, he's not like the biggest powerful guy that would have stopped AD fully, but I think he would have mitigated that damage for sure. So they definitely could have used Montrezl Harrell. It probably would have been a tie game and probably would have gone to overtime or something. But it was really crazy. It was really good. It definitely made me want to look forward to Clippers versus Lakers. I hope that the Clippers do clinch the second seed. I know that they lost to the Suns, but hopefully they get to clinch the second seed, because I would want to see them at the Western Conference Finals, not in the first or second round. I want them in the Western Finals to go at it. That would be a really great series to watch.
So at the time of this recording, the Lakers have played 3 games. and they've won 2 of those 3. They've also clinched the number 1 seed in the Western Conference for the first time since 2010. You know, Kobe led them to the championship that year. So does this feel like a team of destiny, Sonny?
It's hard to say, man, because of the break. If you would have asked me back in March when they had just came off of the big Clippers win and the Bucks win back to back, I would have said, absolutely, this is our year. Like, we're winning the chip again. It's coming back home for Kobe, for Gigi, you know. But 4 months, a very long 4 months since then, or 5 months now, actually. If we're by the time this comes out, we're closer to 5 months, and it's been 4 months. It's hard to say. Yes, they have looked very good in the 3 games that we've seen. For the most part, 2.5 games they've looked solid. That second half against the Raptors was a bit of a mess. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I still think it's the Lakers' championship to lose. But you know, there was a lot of wild cards with that. The Clippers are a scary team, man. I mean, not having Lou Williams. I mean, to Donald's point, I think Harris would have at least taken some buckets away from AD in that matchup. But then Lou Williams also gives them buckets, and maybe that's the difference in the score, and it turns it the other way around for the Clippers to give the Lakers, you know, that L. And I'm kind of afraid of that a little bit, you know, come playoff time, you know, if they're fully loaded versus our fully loaded players, you know, it really, I mean, I'll tell you what the difference maker in that first game was. It was Caruso.
The Caruso.
We called on this show, on this podcast. I told you the difference maker was going to be Caruso, man. He was clutch in the fourth quarter, just defensively more than anything. And we're going to need a whole lot more of that if we're going to see this thing through to win the to win the title. And we'll see, man. I mean, I don't want to call them, you know, the team of destiny at this point anymore, but I do think, again, it's the Lakers' chip to lose, much to the chagrin of Clippers fans, of the 3 Clippers fans out there. That
no, for real.
We work with one. We work with 2 of them, actually, believe it or not. So there's one extra one out there. It might be Frankie Muniz or Billy Crystal.
Yeah. Clipper Darryl is the only one.
Well, I don't know if you guys have been watching. We just named off 6.
They have a solid fan base.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have been watching the other games from the rest of the league.
Yes.
And it's been crazy to see how close a lot of these games are, which, to Sonny's point, is a testament to how tough it's going to be. So, you know, it feels like even though the Lakers are looking really solid, man, to win by 2 points and then seeing the Suns basically beat the Clippers on a Devin Booker jumper at the buzzer. And that's the Clippers. So it was crazy to see that a lot of these games are really being decided by 10 points or less. And I feel that, I think it's really crazy with this bubble because there is no travel. So all the teams could rest all they want, I guess, and you're not having to worry about hopping on a plane and going somewhere. I think that affects, the performance.
And there is no home court advantage here. So it's like, it really doesn't matter if the Clippers finish 4th. I mean, other than the fact, I agree with you, Donald, I'd love to see that as a Western Conference Finals matchup. But even if the Clippers were to drop all the way to 6th, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter because there's no such thing as home court advantage here anymore. It's just like who's playing the best ball that night is going. And that's why whoever the 8th seed ends up being is scaring me already. Where I'm just kind of like, man, there is no easy out here.
Well, I mean, if it's like the Pelicans, then it might be an easy out.
Maybe easier, that's for sure. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is the first round still going to be 4 out of 7, or is it 3 out of 5?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't even look at the playoff bracket in terms of like the games. I would think 3 out of 5 if they want to like speed it up, because I don't see why you would still want to do a 7-game series on a 1-18.
And that's what scares me. If it's 3 out of 5, that's scary because I think 4 out of 7.
You have more Pelicans, chance to, like, usually the better team has an opportunity to win it, you know.
Exactly.
Best out of 5. Yeah, usually it's a toss up, and I get that the media doesn't really like it when it's that, because then it becomes a thing where like now they have to cover the team that beat the better team for the rest of the series, and they're just like, oh, like these guys aren't as interesting. But yeah, no, for sure. I've been watching it. The Rockets look good. The Jazz look pretty impressive. So it's crazy. It's crazy. Sometimes I think about if with the Lakers now clinching the 1 spot, if the Trailblazers are like the number 8 team, it's going to be an interesting series. With Dame Lillard. But yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you guys real quick. What do you think the Lakers should do for the rest of these kind of seeding games now that they clinched the number 1 spot? Should they still keep playing as hard as they're going to with AD and LeBron, or do you think they should start kind of testing out the other guys?
I think they need to keep their gas on the pedal, man. I mean, after this break, you need to get that chemistry going amongst the rest of your team. More importantly, LeBron and AD are going to keep getting their buckets. You could sit them out and trust that come playoff time they're going to turn it on. But you need the rest of the players, the Dion Waiters, the J.R. Smiths, to learn how to play off of that dynamic duo more.
Yeah.
So that's why they need to get all the reps they can get. Frank Vogel shouldn't be playing them, 40, 42 plus minutes. I don't think it should be more in the high 30s range.
Yeah.
But absolutely, there should be no nights off here. Playoffs are about to start. By the time we drop this episode, playoffs start next week already? Yeah. So yeah, there's no time to really mess around with anything. It's you got to keep it going and make sure you're playing your best basketball by the time the dance begins.
Well, that's so interesting because they have to treat this like the rest of the games now as preseason games. Keep sharp, get ready, but don't go all out. These games don't matter anymore. But you have to be ready and not go into the season, but go into elimination game playoffs. So this is going to be a really delicate balancing act to see going forward what they do with these next 5 games at the time of this recording. Yeah. So
I was going to say I don't memorize their schedule off the top of my head, but I'd be curious to know if any of the, for instance, they would have played the Thunder, the Rockets.
That's it.
They would have had 3 games, I think, at the time of this episode.
2 games. So tomorrow they play the Thunder and then the Rockets on Thursday.
So the Thunder and the Rockets are still in the thick of it in terms of seeding. So those games very much do still matter, not necessarily for the Lakers because they've clinched the number 1 seed, but if they're trying to influence who they're going to face, then yeah, those games matter. Because I would like to avoid the Rockets and the Clippers until the later rounds. But, we'll see what happens.
And it's such a tough thing to tell somebody like LeBron, oh, take this game off. You don't really need to get this win.
Exactly.
He's such a competitor. He's not going to be like, okay, sure, I'll sit down. No, I don't think that's good. He doesn't have that mentality. Before we wrap up this week's episode, we got to go over to the WNBA bubble and get a little bit of an update on what those women are up to. Donald, what are the LA Sparks up to in their bubble?
So the LA Sparks played the Seattle Storm as of the time of this recording, and they lost to them 81-76. They had a 17-point deficit they tried to come back from, but Seattle just really kind of, did a good job of kind of keeping the pressure on and keeping them away from taking the lead. And currently right now the Sparks sit at 2-2 on their record, and Chicago Sky is actually 4-1, and they're the number 1 seed. And I would say if you don't really follow the WNBA or you're trying to just getting into it, the way it works, especially because they're doing a shorter season now, and they're doing a full season, but it's a shorter season. But I think the reason why it works for the WNBA in this bubble, especially for basketball, is because the way the playoffs work with the WNBA, it's not East versus West. It's actually 1 through 8. So they'll play these games, and then wherever they're seated, that's where they're seated. So currently the Sparks at number 6. So it seems like they have a good shot of really just sticking to the playoffs. They'll probably be in the middle of the pack, depending on how they go. Obviously, it's really early. It's only gone 4 games so far, but so far Chicago Sky look like they're really killing it. And I know that the Sparks and the Minnesota Lynx have a history, so it's going to be interesting when they face them. But yeah, definitely the Sparks look like they got something going to at least get in the playoffs, and we'll see how they do when they get in the playoffs for sure.
I love to see the WNBA because when they're out there balling, they're going after it, man. They go after it with just a skill and aggression, which I love seeing, especially in the basketball court. So that's going to wrap it up for us this week. Thank you again to Sunny Amato for joining us. Check out his podcast, The Fox Crate Podcast. Follow him on Instagram at The Fox Crate. More MLB and NBA coverage is coming up next week. Also, maybe a little bit of Champions League since all three of us are big Barca fans. Be sure to follow us
Are you sure
on
about
Instagram.
that? Are you sure about that? Donald and I were talking about how you have the DNA of a Real Madridista.
Wow. This is all going to get cut. Yeah. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at WestBoxScore. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast downloaded. Thanks.
Peace.
What's the DNA of a Real Madrid fan?
Rule number 1, you got to have a lot of haterade in you.
Oh, okay, I can see that. Yeah. But I hate about everything though, not just so.
That's what I mean. That's a Real Madrid trait.
That's funny. That's funny. I'm keeping that.